Hi, my sweet friends, and welcome back to Crochet Every Day with Judy. We're reading from Robinson Crusoe. We're starting with Chapter 11, entitled Friday, Part 2. I was greatly delighted with him and made it my business to teach him everything that was proper and useful, and especially to make him speak and understand me when I spoke. He was a very apt scholar, and he was so merry, so diligent, and so pleased when he could understand me, or make me understand him, that it was very pleasant for me to talk to him. And now my life began to be very easy and happy. After I had been 2 or 3 days in my castle, I thought that in order to get Friday away from this horrid way of feeding and from the relish of a cannibal's stomach, I ought to let him taste other flesh. So I took him out with me one morning to the woods. I saw a she-goat lying down in the shade, and 2 young kids close by her. At once I caught hold of Friday. "Stop," said I, "stand still," and made signs to him not to stir. Immediately I raised my gun, shot, and killed one of the kids. The poor creature, who had, at a distance indeed, seen me kill the savage, his enemy, but did not know, and could not imagine how it was done, was greatly surprised. He trembled and shook and looked so amazed that I thought he would sink down. He ripped up his waistcoat to feel if he was not wounded. As I found, he thought that I was resolved to kill him, for he came and knelt down to me, and embracing my knees said a great many things that I did not understand, but I could see that his meaning was to pray to me not to kill him. I soon found a way to convince him that I would do him no harm. Taking him up by the hand, I laughed at him, and pointing to the kid I had killed, beckoned him to run and get it, which he did. While he was looking to see how the creature was killed, I loaded my gun again, and by I saw a great fowl like a hawk sitting upon a tree within shot. So to let Friday understand a little what I would do, I called him to me again, pointing at the fowl, which was a parrot, though I thought it had been a hawk. Then I pointed to my gun and to the ground under the parrot to let him see that I would make him fall. In this way I made him understand that I would shoot and kill that bird. Accordingly, I fired and bade him look, and immediately he saw the parrot fall. He stood like one frightened again, notwithstanding all that I had said to him. I found that he was the more amazed because he did not see me put anything into the gun. He thought that there must be some wonderful fund of death and destruction in that thing, able to kill man, beast, bird, or any other thing near or far off. I believe, if I would have let him, that he would have worshipped me and my gun. As for the gun itself, he would not so much as touch it for several days after, but would talk to it, desiring it, as I afterwards learned of him, not to kill him. Well, after his astonishment was a little over at this, I pointed to him to run and get the bird which I had shot. He stayed some time, for the parrot, not being quite dead, had fluttered a good way off from the place where she fell. However, he found her, took her up, and brought her to me. As I had perceived his ignorance about the gun before, I took this advantage to load the gun again, and not let him see me do it, that I might be ready for any other mark, but nothing offered at that time. I brought home the kid, and the same evening took the skin off and cut it up as well as I could. Having a pot for that purpose, I boiled or stewed some of the flesh and made some very good broth. After I had begun to eat some, I gave some to my man, who seemed very glad of it and liked it very well. It was very strange to him, however, to see me eat salt with it. He made a sign to me that the salt was not good to eat, and putting a little into his own mouth, he seemed to nauseate at it, and would spit and sputter, washing his mouth with fresh water after it. On the other hand, I took some meat in my mouth without salt, and I pretended to spit and sputter for want of salt as fast as he had done at it, but it would not do. Having thus fed him with boiled meat and broth, I was resolved to feast him the next day with roasting a piece of the kid. This I did by hanging it before the fire on a string, as I had seen many people do in England, setting 2 poles up, one on each side of the fire and one across the top, and tying the string to the cross stick, letting the meat turn continually. This Friday admired very much. When he came to taste the flesh, he took so many ways to tell me how well he liked it that I could not but understand him. At last he told me he would never eat man's flesh any more, which I was very glad to hear. The next day I set him to work beating some corn out and sifting it in the manner I used to do. He soon understood how to do it as well as I, especially after he had seen what the meaning of it was, and that it was to make bread of. After that, I let him see me make my bread and bake it too, and in a little time Friday was able to do all the work for me as well as I could do it myself. I began now to consider that having 2 mouths to feed instead of one, I must provide more ground for my harvest, and plant a larger quantity of corn than I used to do. Accordingly, I marked out a larger piece of land and began the fence in the same manner as before. Friday not only worked very hard, but very cheerfully. I told him that it was for corn to make more bread because he was now with me, and that I might have enough for him and myself too. He appeared to understand that part, and let me know that he would work the harder for me if I would tell him what to do. This was the pleasantest year of all the life I led in this place. Friday began to talk pretty well and chatted a great deal to me. He understood the names of almost everything I had occasion to call for, and of every place I had occasion to send him to, so that I began to have some use of my tongue again. Excuse me. Besides the pleasure of talking to him, I had a singular satisfaction in the fellow himself. His simple, unfeigned honesty appeared to be more and more every day, and I began really to love the creature, and I believe he loved me as much as possible. I had a mind once to see if he had any lingering inclination for his own country. I had taught him English so well that he could answer almost any questions, so I asked him whether the nation that he belonged to never conquered in battle. At this he smiled and said, "Yes, yes, we always fight the better," and so we began the following discourse. "You always fight the better," said I. "How came you to be taken prisoner then, Friday?" Friday: "My nation beat much for all that." Master: "How beat? If your nation beat them, how came you to be taken?" Friday: "They more than my nation in the place where me was. They take 1, 2, 3, and me. My nation beat them in yonder place where me no was. There my nation take 1, 2 great thousand." Master: "But why did not your side recover you from the hands of your enemies then?" Friday: "They run 1, 2, 3, and me, and make go in the canoe. My nation have no canoe that time." Master: "Well, Friday, and what does your nation do with the men they take? Do they carry them away and eat them as these did?" Friday: "Yes, my nation eats mans too, eat all up." Master: "Where do they carry them?" Friday: "Go to other place where they think." Master: "Do they come hither?" Friday: "Yes, yes, they come hither, come other else place." Master: "Have you been here with them?" Friday: "Yes, I been here," points to the northwest side of the island, which it seems was their side. By this, I understood that my man Friday had formerly been among the savages who had come on shore on the farther parts of the island on man-eating occasions such as he had been brought for. Some time after, when I took courage to carry him to that side, he knew the place and told me that he had been there once when they had eaten up 20 men, 2 women, and 1 child. After I had had this discourse with him, I asked him how far it was from our island to the shore, and whether the canoes were not often lost. He told me that there was no danger, no canoes ever lost, but that after a little way out to sea there was a current, and the wind was always one way in the morning and the other in the afternoon. This I thought to be no more than the sets of the tide going out or coming in, but I afterwards understood that it was caused by the great draught and reflux of the mighty river Orinoco. In the mouth of this river, as I thought afterwards, our island lay. I thought that this land, which I perceived to the west and northwest, was the great island Trinidad on the north point of the mouth of the river. I asked Friday 1,000 questions about the country, the inhabitants, the sea, the coast, and what nations were near. He told me all he knew with the greatest openness imaginable. I asked him the names of the several nations of his sorts of people, but could get no other names than Caribs. From this, I easily understood that these were the Caribes, which our maps place on that part of America which reaches from the mouth of the river Orinoco to Guyana and onward to St. Martha. He told me that up a great way beyond the moon, by which he meant the region west of their country, there dwelt white bearded men like me, and pointed to my great whiskers which I mentioned before, and that they had killed much mans. By all this I understood that he meant the Spaniards, whose cruelties in America had been spread over whole countries, and were remembered by all the nations from father to son. I inquired if he could tell me how I might come from this island and get among those white men. He told me yes, I might go in 2 canoe. I could not understand what he meant by 2 canoe, till at last, with difficulty, I found that he meant that it must be a large boat, as big as 2 canoes. This part of Friday's discourse began to interest me very much. From this time I entertained some hopes that, one time or another, I might find an opportunity to make my escape from this place, and that this poor savage might be a means of helping me to do it. I now wanted to lay a foundation of religious knowledge in Friday's mind, so I asked him one time who made him. The poor creature did not understand me, but thought I had asked him who his father was. But I took it another way and asked him who made the sea, the ground he walked on, and the hills and the woods. He told me that it was one old Benamuckee that lived beyond all. He could describe nothing of this great person, but that he was very old, much older, he said, than the sea or the land, than the moon or the stars. I asked him then if this person had made all things, why all things did not worship him. He looked very grave, and with a perfect look of innocence said, all things said "Oh" to him. I asked him if the people who died in his country went away anywhere. He said that they all went to Benamuckee. Then I asked him whether those they ate up went thither too. He said yes. From these things I began to instruct him in the knowledge of the true God. I told him that the great maker of all things lived up there, pointing up toward heaven, that he governed the world by the same power and providence by which he had made it, that he was omnipotent, could do everything for us, give everything to us, take everything from us. Thus, by degrees, I opened his eyes. He listened with great attention and received with pleasure the notion of Jesus Christ being sent to redeem us, and of the manner of making our prayers to God and his being able to hear us even in heaven. I sent Friday for something a great way off, and while he was gone I seriously prayed to God that he would enable me to instruct this poor savage, assisting by his Spirit the heart of the poor ignorant creature to receive the light of the knowledge of God in Christ, reconciling him to himself. I prayed that he would guide me so to speak to Friday from the Word of God that his conscience might be convinced, his eyes opened, and his soul saved. I had, God knows, more sincerity than knowledge in all the methods I took for this poor creature's instruction. I must acknowledge what I believe all that act upon the same principle will find, that in laying things open to him, I really informed and instructed myself in many things that I either did not know or had not fully considered before, but which occurred naturally to my mind upon my searching into them for the information of this poor savage. I had more pleasure in my inquiry after things upon this occasion than ever I had felt before, so that whether this poor wild wretch was the better for me or not, I had great reason to be thankful that he had come to me. My grief sat lighter upon me, my habitation grew comfortable to me beyond measure. I reflected that in this solitary life which I had been confined to, I had not only been moved myself to look up to heaven and to seek the hand that brought me thither, but I was now to be made an instrument under Providence to save the life, and for aught I knew, the soul of a poor savage, and bring him to the true knowledge of religion and of the Christian doctrine, that he might know Jesus Christ, whom to know is life eternal. In this thankful frame, I continued all the remainder of my time, and the conversation which employed the hours between Friday and me was such as made the 3 years which we lived there together perfectly and completely happy, if any such thing as complete happiness can be found in a sublunary state. The savage was now a good Christian, a much better than I, though I have reason to hope and bless God for it that we were equally penitent and comforted, restored penitents. We had here the Word of God to read, and we were no farther off for his Spirit to instruct than we should have been in England. I always applied myself to reading the Scriptures and to letting Friday know as well as I could the meaning of what I read. After Friday and I became more intimately acquainted, and he could understand almost all that I said to him and could speak fluently, though in broken English to me, I told him my story. I led him into the mystery of gunpowder and bullets and taught him how to shoot. I gave him a knife, which he was wonderfully delighted with, and I made him a belt with a frog hanging to it, such as in England we wear hangers in, and in the frog, instead of a hanger, I gave him a hatchet. I described to him the countries of Europe, and particularly England, which I came from. I told him how we lived, how we worshipped God, how we behaved to one another, and how we traded in ships to all parts of the world. I gave him an account of the wrecked vessel which I had been on board of, and showed him as nearly as I could the place where she had lain. She had been gone for some time. I showed him the ruins of our boat, which we lost when I escaped, and which was now fallen almost to pieces. Upon seeing this boat, Friday stood musing some time and said nothing. I asked him what he studied upon. At last he said, "Me see such boat like come to place at my nation." I did not understand him for a great while, but at last, when I had examined farther into it, I understood by him that a boat, such as that had been, came on shore upon the country where he lived, that is, as he explained it, was driven thither by stress of weather. I presently imagined that some European ship must have been cast away upon their coast, and the boat must have gotten loose and been driven ashore. I was so dull that I never once thought of men making their escape from a wreck thither, so I only inquired for a description of the boat. Friday described the boat to me well enough, but he brought me better to understand him when he added with some warmth, "We saved the white mans from drown." Then I asked him if there were any white mans, as he called them, in the boat. Yes, he said, the boat full of white mans. I asked, how many? He told me upon his fingers, 17. I asked, what became of them? He told me, they live, they dwell at my nation. This put new thoughts into my head again, for I presently imagined that these might be the men belonging to the ship that was cast away in sight of my island, who after the ship was struck on the rock and they saw her inevitably lost, had saved themselves in their boat, and were landed upon that wild shore among savages. Upon this I inquired of him more critically what had become of them. He assured me that they still lived there and had been there about 4 years. He said that the savages let them alone and gave them food. I asked him how it came to pass that they did not kill them and eat them. He said, no, they make brother with them, meaning, as I understood him, that they had made a truce. Then he added, they no eat mans, but when make the war, fight. That is to say, they never eat any men but such as come to fight with them and are taken in battle. It was after this, some considerable time, that we were on the top of the hill at the east side of the island, from whence I had in a clear day discovered the mainland, or continent of America. The weather was very clear, and as Friday looked very earnestly toward the mainland, he began jumping and dancing and called out to me. I asked him what was the matter. Oh, joy, says he, oh, glad, there see my country, there my nation. I observed an extraordinary sense of pleasure appear in his face. His eyes sparkled, and his countenance was alight with strange eagerness, as if he wanted to be in his own country again. This observation of mine put a great many thoughts into me, which made me at first not so easy about my new man Friday as I had been before. I did not doubt that if Friday could get back to his own nation again, he would not only forget all his religion, but all his obligations to me. But I wronged the poor honest creature very much, for which I was very sorry afterwards. However, as my jealousy increased and held me some weeks, I was a little more circumspect and not so familiar and kind to him as before, in which I was certainly in the wrong. While my jealousy of him lasted, I was every day pumping him to see if he would disclose any of the new thoughts which I suspected were in him. But I found everything he said so honest and so innocent that I could find nothing to nourish my suspicion. In spite of all my uneasiness, he made me at last entirely his own again, nor did he in the least perceive that I was uneasy, and therefore I could not suspect him of deceit. One day we were walking up the same hill. The weather this time was hazy at sea, so that we could not see the continent. Friday, I said, do not you wish yourself in your own country, your own nation? Yes, he said, I'd be much glad to be at my own nation. What would you do there, I asked. Would you turn wild again, eat man's flesh again, and be savage as you were before? Friday shook his head and said, no, Friday, tell them to live good. Tell them to pray God. Tell them to eat cornbread, cattle flesh, milk, no eat man again. Why then, I told him, they will kill you. Seeing my alarm, he looked grave and said, no, they no kill me. They willing love learn. He meant by this that they would be willing to learn. He added that they had learned much of the bearded men that had come in the boat. Then I asked if he would go back to his people. He smiled at that and told me he could not swim so far. I told him I would make a canoe for him. He told me he would go if I would go with him. I go, said I. Why, they will eat me if I come there. No, said he, make them no eat you. Me make they much love you. He meant he would tell them how I had killed his enemies and saved his life, and so he would make them much love me. From this time, I confess, I had a mind to venture over and see if I could possibly join with these bearded men who, I made no doubt, were Spaniards or Portuguese. I did not doubt that if I could, we might find some method to escape from thence, being upon the continent, and a good company together, better than I could from an island 40 miles off the shore, and alone without help. So after some days, I took Friday to work again and told him that I would give him a boat to go back to his own nation. Accordingly, I took him to my frigate. When I had cleared it of the water, I brought it out, showed it to him, and we both went into it. I found that he was very dexterous at managing it, and would make it go almost as swiftly again as I could. So I said to him, well now, Friday, shall we go to your nation? He looked very dull at my saying so, which it seems was because he thought the boat was too small to go so far. I told him then I had a bigger, so the very next day I went to the place where the first boat lay, which I had made, but which I could not get into the water. He said that was big enough, but as I had taken no care of it, and it had lain 2 or 3 and 20 years there, The sun had split and dried it so that it was in a manner rotten. Friday told me that such a boat would do very well and carry much enough victual, drink, bread. Upon the whole, I was by this time so fixed upon my design of going over with him to the continent that I told him that we would go and make one as big as that, and he should go home in it. He answered not one word, but looked very grave and sad. I asked him what was the matter with him. He answered with a question. Why you angry mad with Friday? What me done? I asked him what he meant, and told him that I was not angry with him at all. No angry, no angry, said he, repeating the words several times. Why send Friday home away to my nation? Why, said I, Friday, did you not say you wished you were there? Yes, yes, said he, wish we both there. No wish Friday there, no master there. In a word, he would not think of going there without me. You shall go without me. Leave me here to live by myself as I did before. He looked confused at this. Running to one of the hatchets which he used to wear, he took it up hastily and gave it to me. What must I do with this? Said I to him. You take kill Friday, said he. What must I kill you for? Said I again. He returned very quickly. What you send Friday away for? Take kill Friday, no send Friday away. As he spoke, tears stood in his eyes, and I was so affected that I said that I would never send him away if he was willing to stay with me. I found that all the foundation of his desire to go to his own country was laid in his ardent affection to the people and his hopes of my doing them good. This was a thing which I had no notion of myself, so I had not the least thought or intention or desire of undertaking it. But still, I had a strong inclination to attempt an escape, founded on the supposition gathered from the former discourse that there were 17 bearded men there. Therefore, without any more delay, I went to work with Friday to find out a great tree proper to fell and make a large canoe for the voyage. After searching some time, Friday at last pitched upon a tree, for I found he knew much better than I what kind of wood was fittest for it. I cannot tell to this day what wood to call the tree we cut down, except that it was very like the tree we call fustic, or between that and the Nicaragua wood, for it was much of the same color and smell. Friday was for burning the hollow or cavity of this tree out to make it into a boat, but I showed him how to cut it out with tools. After I had showed him, he did it very handily, and after about a month's hard labor we finished it, and made it very handsome, especially when with our axes, which I showed him how to handle, we cut and hewed the outside into the true shape of a boat. After this, however, it cost us nearly a fortnight's time to get her along, as it were, inch by inch, upon great rollers into the water. When she was in, she would have carried 20 men with ease. It amazed me to see with what dexterity and how swiftly my man Friday would manage her, turn her, and paddle her along. So I asked him if he would, and if we might venture over in her. Yes, he said, me venture over in her very well, though great wind blow. However, I had a further design that he knew nothing of, and that was to make a mast and a sail, and to fit her with an anchor and a cable. As to the mast, that was easy enough to get. I pitched upon a straight young cedar tree which I found near the place, and of which there were plenty in the island. I set Friday to work to cut it down, and gave him directions how to shape and order it, but the sail was my particular care. I knew I had pieces of old sails, but as I had had them now 26 years by me, and had not been very careful to preserve them, they were nearly all rotten. However, I found 2 pieces which appeared pretty good, and with a great deal of pains and awkward, tedious stitching for want of needles, I at length made a 3-cornered ugly thing, such as we call in England a shoulder of mutton sail. It was to go with a boom at the bottom, and a little short sprit at the top, such as usually our ship's longboats sail with, and such as I best knew how to manage, because it was such a one as I used in the boat in which I made my escape from Barbary. I was nearly 2 months rigging and fitting out my mast and sails, for I fitted them very completely, making a small stay and a sail or foresail to it, to assist if we should turn to windward. What was more than all, I fixed a rudder to the stern of her to steer with, and though I was but a bungling shipwright, yet as I knew the usefulness and even necessity of such a thing, I applied myself with so much pains to do it, that at last I brought it to pass. After all this was done, I had my man Friday to teach as to what belonged to the navigation of my boat. He knew very well how to paddle the canoe, but he knew nothing about a sail and a rudder, and how the sail jibbed and filled this way or that way, as the course we sailed changed. When he saw this, he stood like one astonished and amazed. However, with a little use, I made all these things familiar to him, and he became an expert sailor, except that I could make him understand very little of the compass. However, there was not much occasion for the compass in these parts. I was now entered on the 27th year of my captivity in this place. The 3 last years, when I had Friday with me, ought to be left out of the account, for my life was quite another kind than in all the rest of the time. I kept the anniversary of my landing here with the same thankfulness to God for his mercies as the first. If I had had such cause of acknowledgment at first, I had much more so now, having such additional testimonies of the care of Providence over me, and the great hopes I had of being effectually and speedily delivered. I had a persistent impression that my deliverance was at hand, and that I should not be another year in this place. However, I went on with all my work as usual. The rainy season was in the meantime upon me, when I kept more within doors than at other times. We had stowed our new vessel as securely as we could, bringing her up into the creek where, as I said in the beginning, I landed my rafts from the ship. Thus we waited for the months of November and December, in which I planned to make my venture. We'll stop there and start next time with Chapter 12. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.